open at my daily take, my daily rant over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, "Should a handful of billionaires own more wealth than the bottom 50% of all Americans?" And I start out by pointing out that Senators Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio have endorsed and blessed and apparently play a role with a new think tank that is going to be trying to change the Republican Party's messaging. They say, we want to think differently. This is a quote. Think differently about labor versus capital than Republicans have in recent generations. Now, they come right out and say the reason that they're doing this is because of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump won the White House in 2016, and he won it on a series of promises. He said that he was going to bring our jobs home from China. He said he was going to empower labor unions. He said he was going to raise taxes on the rich so high that my friends won't ever talk to me again. And he was going to give every American full health insurance that cost less than Obamacare. I mean, these were all lies, but these were the lies that helped him win the White House. So the Republican Party is thinking, or at least this think tank apparently is thinking, hey, if Trump can do it, so can we. Well, Rubio and Hawley are clearly thinking this, which raises an interesting question. Why do nations create and sustain economies? Is the economy here to serve average Americans, or are working class people here to serve those who own and control the economy? Now, throughout history, we've had two answers to that question. Just dealing with recent history, starting in 1901, progressive Republican President Teddy Roosevelt said, no, the economy is here to serve average people. And what came out of that was the Tillman Act in 1907 that made it a federal crime for any corporation to give any money or any support of any kind to any candidate for federal office. The graduated progressive income tax, which was passed in 1913. Now by this time, Taft was president, but I believe. Maybe it was Wilson. I'd have to go back and look. But in any case, this was something that was proposed by Teddy Roosevelt. It took a constitutional amendment to do it, and the same thing, with the what was the third one here? The same thing with the estate tax, and these three pieces of legislation essentially started building the American middle class after 1900. And the middle class grew fairly rapidly until 1920, when Warren Harding came in. Then things changed. The Republican president, on a platform of dropping that top income tax rate from 75%, or excuse me, 91%, which is where it was post-World War I, all the way down to 25%, which he did. And he also deregulated the banks. And this kicked off the so-called Roaring Twenties, when really, really rich people got really, really richer, and average working people became the working poor. And F. Scott Fitzgerald chronicled this in The Great Gatsby, for example. So that produced the Republican Great Depression. And then in the 1930s, of course, FDR got us out of it and came back with the answer, no, the economy is here to serve working people. See, Harding has said, no, working people are here to serve the economy. So, FDR comes in and says, no, the economy is here to serve working people. And sure enough, right up until 1980, we saw the wages and wealth of working people, the mid quintile, poor people, the bottom 20%, and the top 20%, and rich people, the top 20%, all increasing at identical rates right up until 1980. And then in 1980, boom, Reagan drops the top income tax rate from 74% down to 25%, drops the corporate tax rate from 50% down to 25%, and all of a sudden the rich start getting richer and the poor start getting poorer, and the average working person, it just flatlines for the next 41 years till right now. This issue of why do we have an economy, who benefits from it, is something that has been a topic of debate in politics forever. I mean, you remember Honoré de Balzac said, every great fortune starts with a great crime. Well, Adam Smith, he's famous for his book Wealth of Nations, which was published in 1776. But in 1759, he published a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which asked this question: why do we have economies? Why do we have governments, for that matter? Is it to serve the rich, or is it to serve everybody else and the rich? And in Theory of Moral Sentiments, and I quote from it at some length, I'm not going to read it to you, but I quote from it at some length at HartmannReport.com today, where basically Adam Smith said, the instinct of the majority of people is always to do what's right, to help other people, to help the less fortunate, to be there for each other. Unfortunately, there's always a small slice of our population who are willing to basically rip off everybody in order to make themselves rich. And Smith's, in fact, here's an actual quote. This is from Theory of Moral Sentiments. He says, how selfish soever man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others and render their happiness necessary to him, though he derives nothing from it except the pleasure of seeing it. And then he goes on to say this, and then he talks about, but the problem is these rich people. And he says, this disposition to admire and almost to worship the rich and the powerful, and to despise or at least to neglect persons of poor and mean condition, is at the same time the great and most universal cause of the corruption of our moral sentiments. Our moral sentiments. And this, of course, is what Harry Truman talked about. Sean, I'm going to play a clip here out of my computer. This is what Harry Truman talked about back in 1952. This was March 29, 1952. Harry Truman brings up this issue of morality in government that Adam Smith wrote about in 1859, and that many of the founders of this country quoted from Adam Smith during, numerous letters at the Constitutional Convention. So here's Harry Truman talking about it.
Now I want to say something very important to you about this issue of morality in government. It is just as immoral to use the lawmaking power of the government to enrich the few at the expense of the many as it is to steal money from the public treasury. That is stealing money from the public treasury. Legislation that favored the greed of monopoly and the trickery of Wall Street was a form of corruption that did the country 4 times as much harm as Teapot Dome ever did. Private selfish interests are always trying to corrupt the government in this way. Powerful financial groups are always trying to get favors for themselves. Now, the Democratic administration has been fighting against these efforts to corrupt the powers of government. We haven't always won, but we have never surrendered, and we never will.
He continues.
And where have the Republicans been in this fight for morality in government?
This is 1952.
Do they come out and vote with us to keep the special interests from robbing the public? Not at all. Most of them are on the other side. The same thing when you come to the question of the conduct of government officials. The Republicans make a great whoop and holler about the honesty of federal employees, but they are usually the first to show up in a government office asking for special favors for private interests and in raising Cain if they don't get them.
There you go.
These Republican gentlemen can't have it both ways. They can't be for morality on Tuesday and Thursday and then be for special privileges for their clients on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
President Harry Truman, March 29, 1952. Here we are, 70 years later, exactly 70 years later, and it's the exact same battle. But, I'm actually fairly optimistic right now. I think that people are waking up in this country. I really do. I mean, all the signs I see tell me that people are waking up to this. And in fact, I think the Republican Party has figured this out, and this is why Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio are, hopping in with this new think tank to try to reinvent Republican messaging to be, we're for the average working person. Right.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You think the GOP is going to get away with reinventing themselves? Or what if they actually did? I mean, might that actually be a good thing? I don't know. What do you think?